computer. Here we go. Let's see if this is working.
Maybe that's why
Is this
somebody
working?
raising their hand.
Yeah, I'll bet. Here we
Okay.
go.
Yeah, Matt said we're good now.
All right, we're good. All right. Sorry.
Rewind the tape, start over.
Oh man, the joys of new stuff. All right, thank you, Jamie, for the thumbs up. So we welcome to week 268. It is our first time in this podcast room, and it feels like it's blazing hot in here, which I'm not digging at all. So I'm going to actually open this door, see if we can get a little bit more coolness in. But we are in the Savona Mill. It's a 105-year-old structure, and thanks to this man right here, we are in it. We are still debugging. We just moved in this weekend. Greg, you're funny. So anyway, we're going to be talking about trends and traps of commercial real estate. And after starting this 20 months ago with you, what a journey. And we started with all I wanted to do is just renegotiate our rates, because we had gone from $13 a square foot 10 years ago at it being the first ones in Camden. Sorry, man. I'm keeping the door open because it's hot in here. So hey, it's just how it works. But our new rate was $52. So we got the engineer trying to get it cooler in here. There is no air coming in here.
So yeah, we found some middle ground, right?
So we found some middle ground. So fortunately, I think we're at 35, something like that. In this building, and it works way better. And so big shout out to On Block Construction, who has done a great job in this building. Redline, our architects, they've been fantastic. Playbook has been invaluable, quite frankly, in just project managing and the liaison between us and everybody else. It still takes a lot of work from our standpoint, but we're really grateful for all of those folks, and Newmark. And then Foundry is the project, or the property management group, and Portman Holdings out of Atlanta owns this building and this beautiful 33-acre campus on the Greenway. So we can talk more about the twists and turns, especially with a historic building. We've had to have permits from not only the county of Mecklenburg, but also with U.S. Park Service, also with the Historic Society. So that has been a challenge, but it's been a great journey. So I thought, why not? Let's feature good old Patrick on here. He's been a good sport. Have Jack on here, as always a good sport. And he brought us some umbrellas, so we've got some nice Shoemaker umbrellas instead of these little Charlie Brown umbrellas that were sitting in the front. It was just so bad. The feng shui was just not working.
It still had the like the hooks, the Mary Poppins.
Yeah, it's Mary Poppins. Not working. So anyway, we are going to be moving to a Teams environment because we've got these beautiful, neat sound bars and great camera systems that will go back and forth. So we are going to be doing the Anything But Typical podcast in here, and we do have a podcast light, which is that red halo up there. But Teams and Zoom doesn't seem to be. It's kind of like Apple and Microsoft. They say they work together, not quite. So anyway, we've got to do some adjustments, and we almost made the audible last night, and they're like, nah, people will still be on here. So anywho, that's kind of where we're at. Let's see and make sure we got things going on. Let's see what's happening in the chat. Okay, good. Thank you. And questions and answers. Yeah, Eugene, thank you guys for letting us know, but we'll get past this and we'll make it work next week. Hopefully better. Adam is gone. He is in oh, this is funny. My phone was recording everything. and giving me a text message evidently, so whatever. But what we're gonna do, so Adam is in Hawaii. It's been a long dream of his and his family to go there, so I'm really glad that they could do that. So anyway, Jack, before we dive into commercial real estate a little bit more, anything happening that business owners should be knowing about right now?
So I think people have forgotten that I'm not a banker, but I get this question. I've gotten this question a lot over the past, well, week or longer as to what we think interest rates or what's going to happen with interest rates. And so I'm just, people will say a varying of things that is from there will be no interest rate changes at all this year to there quite possibly could be 3 interest rate changes. So I went to the internet. I did not use Chat
You didn't use
this time.
ChatGPT?
I did not. No, I went to a trusted source. And this was something that was published actually at 8:48 a.m. this morning, and it's mortgage rates forecast for 2025. After reaching a peak of 7.04% in January of 25, mortgage rates retreated to the mid 6s in March, then reversed course and got stuck between 6.7 and 6.9% since May. Average 30-year fixed mortgage rate was 6.72. And then fast forward in a widely anticipated move, the Fed panel voted to keep the federal funds rate unchanged at its July 2-day meeting. The next meeting is next month in September. And then here they actually talked about the voting. Only 9 members voted to hold rates steady, while 2 dissented, voting for a 1/4 point cut. The decision maintains the 4.25 to 4.5 target range. And then it finished with what's next. So, so the next meeting is September 16th and 17th. And will they resume rate cuts at its September policy gathering? I think that the odds are that it looks like probably not, but that there would be at least one more reduction by the end of the year. And again, that's not me. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not an expert, but that's what I'm hearing. I don't know what you're hearing in your ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. That's a lot of what we're hearing as well. And it's just, it's interesting, the federal funds rate and, kind of the impact, throughout how it affects commercial real estate loans, how it affects leasing demand and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing that, the 10-year treasury, which is kind of a big indicator of where interest rates on commercial real estate loans are going to end up, that's elevated. And the thought is we think it may still remain elevated for a little bit, given, just inflation is going to be a little bit higher than the target they originally thought, and just, kind of uncertainty with kind of the changing trade policies. So, the good thing from, we can dive into a little bit later, but the commercial real estate, kind of acquisition, disposition, the capital markets, if rates can be stabilized, activity will occur. It's the volatility that really kind of throws a wrench into the machine.
Okay. And then another thing I wanted to bring up was that comes up, and if you remember, we were talking about drafting contracts in the context of another pandemic, epidemic, and is that a force majeure event? Force majeure in its purest form means something that is unanticipated that has an impact on the parties to a contract. And it allows them to basically put things on hold as far as their performance because they're unable to perform because of things outside of their control. So similarly, when we talk about tariffs now and the increase in prices potentially in the supply chain and ultimately how that impacts consumers or our customers, business customers, and the inability for sales to slow down, and therefore, where you have a contract that is a requirements contract where you're required to buy a certain amount, and now you don't want to stock up on inventory that's not getting sold. So what happens? What I'm seeing is you can't lump that into the force majeure clause because it's something that is essentially foreseeable. We've seen kind of the chaos that it's created, even though
We don't know what it will be.
yeah, and I've had clients who have said, and I may have said this last week or previously, they will receive a shipment today and have to pay a certain dollar amount in tariffs to get it beyond the fence at customs. And then next week, same shipment, same quantity. They don't know what they're going to pay until the customs officer tells them what they're going to pay, which may be different than what they paid in the prior week. So what is happening is we are building in language into the contracts to essentially create a mini force majeure clause, but we can't call it that. And so that gives the ability for the parties to renegotiate a contract midway through the term of the contract when things like this occur. And then it becomes a negotiation of, well, what is the trigger? Is it that it's a 40% additional cost? Is it 30%? Is it 2%? And obviously it's based upon the product and the cost itself. So, a 2% increase in a very expensive product is going to be the same as a large increase in a smaller price product. So there's those considerations. So just, up to date on that. Please be aware of those things. And conversely, make sure you're looking at your contracts to see how locked in you are and can the other side force a price change on you. Again, your negotiability to be able to avoid that. And ultimately terminate the contract. If you can't come to a new agreement, then it's okay. We will continue onward for the next 60 days. But this is your notice that there's a 60-day termination. So basically, I guess really at the end of the day, cutting through it, you're building in an additional trigger for termination if you can't agree to no price because of something outside of your control, specifically tariffs.
So Papa Joe, since my computer is so far away from me because of cord links, it's a little awkward, but so use the chat, even though some of you don't obey instructions very well, because we always said use the Q&A and then you can harass us in the chat, but everybody kind of uses the chat anyway. So go ahead and just use the chat. But because we can see it, I've got it up here. So Papa Joe says, what mortgage rate would not act as a deterrent? Is there,
as far as activity
Yeah.
within the market, stability on the commercial side right now, just to give you an idea of people that are out there, it's a lot more private capital than it is kind of institutional buyers at the moment. Private capital, they've got to transact, put food on the table. So they're heavier on being involved with bids for properties. When the interest rate is stable, they can, throughout their process through to locking in their rate and closing, and it's predictable, they can adjust their pricing accordingly. It's the volatility where it really sets things off, because you negotiate a price, you have a look at an interest rate at that point, you get to further down the line and suddenly there's adjustments, and a lot of what we're seeing is deal no longer underwrites. So the stability side is the key on the commercial transactions. As far as rates, that's different investor profiles as far as what they want to achieve and what they're willing to kind of jump in at. So sorry, a little bit of a vague answer there, but really what we're seeing is more of the volatility of the interest rates is what has caused the problems or reduced the number of transactions.
Yep. And so, Joe, what my answer is going to be, and so does Gary, which is basically what was just said, is that it depends. 100%. So it depends on what the use of the capital is. Loan, is it for capital improvement? Is it for long term that you can overcome the cost of using that money? Is it something that you can afford to borrow for a while, but you have a plan to pay it back more than the minimum, so you're accelerating your repayment. So all those things come into play. So I don't think that there is a specific number. There's probably statistics out there that would say if they were to lower it by a quarter percentage point, historically, what has been our behavior as borrowers for that? What has been the behavior of lenders? Are they more willing to, are they, money has tightened up. And again, I don't see the list, but if we have any bankers on the line, I apologize. But, we hear that, yeah, open for business. Well, yeah, open for some business, but not necessarily all business, because people are very protective. Because imagine going through and loaning a company money that may be at a lower interest rate, that borrower may be more able to service that loan and pay the loan. Whereas as the interest rates go higher, then there's a higher risk of lack of repayment or non-payment, and or defaults, late payments, and those kind of things. And so there's a lot more at least we see a lot more due diligence. We see the banks asking for a lot more information, and sometimes asking for the same information many times to make sure that it is accurate, or just being kind of like they have so much going on, they want to make sure that they have triple checked everything. So it's just, I
Very,
see
very
our clients
cautious.
going through a lot more hoops to get money from lenders.
I didn't see any bankers on there.
Okay, good.
Hey, we'd love to have some bankers on there, but anyway. I'd be very curious as to, your thoughts out there. It's interesting, man. These lights, it's a very energy efficient building. But these lights will go off if there's no activity, which is great. This is a silver lead building, which is really cool. Because the last building that we did a reno in that I was involved in was Axiom Creative Group at 1415 South Mint. And it was much lower ceilings than this. These are 16-foot ceilings. But because it was also on the historic registry, we had to have single pane steel mullion windows, which you might as well just have had screen doors, because it was extremely hot in the summer. Even though this podcast room has been hotter for some reason, they're rebalancing in this building because it's 3-story building, and so they're rebalancing the air handlers or whatever. But it was so bloody hot in the summer and freezing cold in the winter. And I was like, with the energy efficiency push, why isn't this happening? But
Yeah, we have the same issue. I know on Mondays, depending on what season it is. So on Mondays, if it's wintertime, I will bring something to put over, a sports coat or something. And then, but on Mondays, and then in the summer, it's going to be hot, so don't overdress. But then, yes, but then during the week, they over ventilate it. And so you end up being cold
yeah.
in the summer, which is, again, I mean, we would think, well, we're uptown, so you would think that they would have figured that out, but
Yeah, it's always interesting, all the nuances and the quirks and that sort of thing. But so hopefully we'll have an open house here. But and it's really not about this, but the last time I was involved in that was with Brian and Paul, my partners at Axiom, but they owned the building. I didn't want to buy into it at the time, and I'm glad I didn't, because it was urban pioneering that took a long time for it to actually catch up. There were shell casings in the parking lot repeatedly, and it was just kind of now it's in a great place, but it was a little sketchy at the time. But was there a contest to go to Hawaii that I missed? Yes. You'll have to talk to Joe, to Adam about that, Joe. I'm sorry that you missed it. It must have been one of the weekends or weeks that you weren't on the podcast, but Adam won the gift from Shoemaker. Instead of a Starbucks card, it was actually a free trip to Hawaii. these guys really must be raking in a lot of money.
You weren't supposed to say that out loud. Now I'm in trouble. If our management committee sees that, they're in so
Oh,
much trouble.
gosh.
But I do want to go to Hawaii, but I don't know if we're going to be able to as a family because I showed my daughter the show Lost from a couple weeks ago,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
filmed it in Hawaii, and it was just, I mean, it's kind of creepy a
It
little
is
bit in
creepy.
some places, right, kind of thing, and the way it ended and everything else. And so she's like, I don't want to go.
Too
Because-
soon.
Yeah, because we have to think about a graduation, college graduation present, and so it won't be that. Maybe we can get my son to go out in a couple years to take him
Yeah.
out there, but so yeah, Hawaii is not in my near future.
Well, hopefully they're dodging the mosquitoes because there's is it dengue fever or something like that, which is not good. So hopefully they're dodging that. But I hope they have a wonderful trip because he deserves it. He's worked hard, but he did pick a very convenient time to miss because I was in charge of this move with Savina and Matt Pugh. So shout out to those guys. We worked our butts off, and Adam was on a beach somewhere. So he's gonna catch some heck, when he gets back.
Yes, absolutely.
As he should.
Yes.
But one of the things that I really would like to know from you guys' standpoint is questions that you have, whether it be lease versus buy. And sometimes maybe that's not even an option, but that was something that we were looking at. And we thought, well, and we knew we could find some additional investors besides some of us that were owners that wanted to participate. The problem is there was no inventory. So talk us a little bit about what's happening in that world if somebody really did want to buy.
Sure. Inventory, as far as availability for sale has increased some since we started our search,
Yeah.
a year and a half ago. But what we're seeing, especially in the office side, is it's kind of two-pronged for the most part, meaning that you're finding buildings that are high vacancy, that the ownership is either needs to redeploy somewhere else, willing to take a loss, or they have maturing debt and they're in trouble and they've got to it's either going to special servicing or they're getting out of it. And those properties are trading at a pretty steep discount. Now there hasn't been a ton of them, but it's happened some. There's been a couple of buildings downtown, rather large,
Oh, yeah.
kind of institutional buildings that have traded at very steep discounts. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got like the core properties that we would call kind of like trophy. So in Charlotte, like there's 2-building development Vantage, which has a big kind of green park in the center. It's on Carson, kind of not too far from the Panther Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
That not at the pre-pandemic levels as far as kind of like a cap rate or price per square foot, but very healthy numbers. Very sought after. They had a big bid list and whatnot. So that's the other end of the spectrum. The in between is kind of the stuff that maybe is doing okay, doesn't have a ton of vacancy, doesn't it isn't really considered kind of trophy, meaning that when I say trophy on the office side, I'm saying that it's relatively recent construction with kind of higher end kind of amenities, larger grand lobby, and then providing kind of the upscale stuff in regards to whether that be upscale food and beverage, fitness, locker room, shower, conferencing, training, the whole kind of works. The ones that don't have that, those are the ones that if the ownership group has patient capital, they're kind of waiting and betting on the velocity of leasing to pick back up, and that they'll be in a better position as opposed to trying to unload at would be a discount. However, the CMBS market, commercially mortgage-backed securities, so kind of the secondary market for notes, there's been an uptick in delinquency reported through that. And there's a healthy amount of maturing debt in the CMBS world over the next couple of years. So a lot of it is what's going to happen here. Like how are they going to get worked out? Can they work out extensions, or are they going to be put in a position where they're giving back a property or potentially trying to sell it at a loss just to rid their hands of it? Now, personally, I thought we would have seen more of that over the past couple of years. But I think the banks did a great job for their customers as far as trying to work with people
Mm,
and not just kind of, a rug pull. So right now, if we can get kind of, the interest rate stabilizing, which it seems like it's doing to an extent, it'll make financing a little bit easier on groups, generating demand. And hopefully, that kind of middle area that's not the depressed property, not the core trophy property. Hopefully we'll see some more owners out there saying, you know what, it is my time to get out and I can get out at a price that makes sense for me. So, I think that people have hung in there. We certainly work with some people that are wanting to buy, like, on various stages, whether it be the small side of, hey, I have my office, we need, a condo for it.
yeah,
And that's, what we're seeing is there not a ton of inventory, and what's coming on the market seems to be snapped up fairly quickly,
yeah,
even though the pool of prospects isn't deep. It's just, but we think that with the kind of the maturity dates and whatnot coming up on different things, that we're going to see more stuff coming out. Specific to Charlotte, there'll be some things that happen, in uptown. Wells has been out with a block that they own, that will be a redevelopment play for someone.
okay.
That you had the 525 North Triangle Odell building that traded at a deep discount. It was heavy vacancy. And then you've got some groups that have considered kind of conversions, like the Johnston building, which is a historical building, it was an office. It was bought.
Is that the trade and try on or?
It's a little bit down. It's kind of 212 South Tryon.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's going to be converted to hotel.
Oh, really?
And there's, we know of other groups that are considering that, of like, does that make sense, to fund what needs to be funded improvement wise, to make those changes, building system and otherwise, to go to more of a, the hospitality route.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I can tell you in the consideration sets that we went, yes, so, and this is actually where this goes a little bit. So Joe says, I'm responding actually to Joe Farrell, but Joseph, how do you verify whether the prospective property could be listed on Airbnb and similar sites? Oh, that's an interesting question. You want to hit that one?
Newmark, we strictly deal with the commercial
Commercial.
side and everything that kind of touches the real estate cycle on the commercial side. So I can't really speak too much to the residential, other than a little bit, just kind of toying around myself. But I've heard the stories about different municipalities putting restrictions on Airbnb. And I'd encourage you to start there, looking into whatever city or county website and access and resources you have there that would address that, and then kind of expand out from there, as far as whether it could be listed on there or not.
Yeah, I would be mindful of the restrictive covenants that come with, whether it's a condo regime or if it's, the property owners association. So if you're buying investment property and put on Airbnb or whatever it may be, I know of neighborhoods down in Charleston in the Seabrook area, which have voted, the property owner association have voted to restrict the number of rental units that are available, and then it becomes a closed list, and you don't get on the list to be able to do that until someone comes off the list. So it's a very limited. It's like I think about, like, the medallions, the New York taxi medallions. There's only there's a limited number of them, and so it's similar to that. So I would check all those type of restrictions, anything that is related to restricting the property to purchase, I think would be something to look at. And I do have an observation and a question. So observation is that when we're on the 22nd floor of our building, and sometimes when I'm feeling like I need to burn a few extra calories, I will walk down to go get my lunch, my salad down at the restaurant. As I'm going down, I notice sometimes I'm very curious. sometimes the door is open, sometimes it's cracked. And I look in and I just see shells, shell after shell after shell after shell.
Yeah,
And it just makes me wonder. So that is my comment. So actually now I have two questions. What does the vacancy perspective for office space look like to lease? But then second question is, when you're considering a purchase, is it better to purchase something that is larger than what you need and lease out other space in the building to create cash flow to subsidize the overall note payment for the entire building? Or should you be a little more selfish and just focus on yourself and get a space that's appropriate for you, even anticipating growth? So maybe a little bit bigger than what you need in that moment, but not going out and getting other places that could be subdivided for suites for other businesses.
Sure. In regards to the second half of the question, I do think it's a good idea to look at strategies like that, where, for instance, if you need 5,000 square feet, maybe looking at a 10,000 square foot building and being able to lease out and generate some of the income to offset your costs. Just knowing, kind of full transparency going into it is you really have to have your team set up before you acquire the property, and make sure that you understand what's kind of the bogeys with likely having to improve the property for the tenant.
Yeah.
And what that looks like. And then really what kind of pool of prospects will it be for? Who's it going to attract? And partnering with groups that can do that, whether that be a brokerage end to help navigate that situation, or project management to kind of figure out cost perspective on construction. But like, as long as you kind of go into it eyes wide open and understand those costs, and if it works for what you are capable of financially, I like that idea, because it gives you a way to kind of mitigate your costs some. And then it also provides you a means of flexibility. If you're in a business that could potentially grow, or maybe unexpectedly grow, then you have a potential way to accommodate that. So I do think that's a good thing to consider. On the first part, in regards to kind of office vacancy, we've seen be rather high. Definitely last couple of years has been much higher than the 10-year average for most larger cities. And offices taking their beating. Some of the other classes have not. Industrial had their heyday, especially e-commerce wise, when everybody was working from home and maybe ordering too many Amazon boxes. But it seems like that world's cooling a little bit, still doing fine, but cooling a little bit. But on the office side, things have started to pick up. And I think some of what's been fueling that is there were, strong job growth numbers late last year, early this year. That slowed some. And there is some uncertainty with what's going on trade policy wise, and how does that affect, the greater economy. So, what that means macroeconomic and when it trickles down. So we think our perspective is that we've seen the trough here in Charlotte.
Okay.
And that we're kind of coming out of that. The 3 years ago was very much what we would call a tenant market, meaning that you had a lot of options. If you were out looking for space to lease, you could not name your terms, but you had the advantage when you're negotiating. And we've noticed, last 7 or 8 months that's begun to tighten as activity is ramped up. There's been, the job announcements that came out here locally in Charlotte, City Financial committing to jobs, Asset Mark committing to jobs here that would be kind of new to market jobs, and others, Coinbase coming in and taking 60,000 square feet in a trophy building in South End.
Really? Coinbase? I didn't know that one.
Yeah, so it's really, those announcements have kind of really pushed the landlords as far as like, okay, it's here. So in stronger submarkets and in attractive properties, which we can get into what kind of users are thinking it's attractive, but the landlords are more confident now. So they're tightening their purse strings when it comes to concessions, providing to tenants and their leases and stuff. And it's still more tenant friendly, but it's kind of equalizing a little bit. So on the vacancy side, your comment about the shell. So, you know, a lot of times from a marketing effort in that particular building, you know, there was a bank that took a bunch of floors and some of their space was very dated. And, you know, in the commercial world, we definitely don't do as good of a job as in the residential world does with kind of how they stage homes to create like that emotional, like we're behind the times on the commercial side. However, you know, you certainly want
AI is going to fix that.
That's
It
right.
fixes everything.
That's right. That's right. So, so dated stuff or things that maybe were a little like maybe not the trend layout wise now. What landlords have done is said, you know what, let's make sure our first impression is there, and also we have the funds to kind of start doing some things now and not incur, you know, we'll incur the capex now. So let's take it back to shell. We'll have a blank canvas come in, and we can attract different groups. At the same time, what we're seeing is smaller spaces, more so smaller, at least in Charlotte. We've heard of the things in other markets where they're doing a little bit larger. They do like speculative suites where they're working with architects to kind of figure out, okay, what's very attractive layouts. But forget the finishes and quality right now, but layouts wise, number of offices, the flow and stuff like that. They come to a decision there, and they're building out spaces on a speculative basis because one, it lowers the capex for tenants, and two, it reduces the timing necessary before occupancy, and people are being very successful doing that. And a lot of that is kind of smaller suites, so call it 2,500 to 8,000 square feet. But there's definitely been some owners downtown that have done very well following that kind of program.
So that kind of, I want to go back to, so Papa Joe has said his movement to have employees return to the office had an impact on commercial space. Are you seeing that uptown?
We did see that. So, you know, that it's changing. So we did see it where there was a period of indecision. People didn't know how to react. And at the same time, kind of it seemed like the power was more with the employee rather than the employer.
Yeah.
So, you know, the remote world or the hybrid world they weren't really messing with it. When I say the employers.
Yeah.
Now that's somewhat added to a lot of the office spaces going through this kind of amenities arms race.
Yeah.
Where it's all right, like we've got to come in and put like a legit fitness center in there, not just like a closet with a treadmill, like something good, locker room and shower, conference room training, have some different ideas, food and beverage wise, in hopes of like, you know, the average person just being like, yeah, I'd like to work in that building, you know, being attractive, getting them to work.
Yeah.
So that's been going on for a few years. And there's been some great offerings on that. And now it seems like, you know, more of the larger corporations are starting to have kind of a back-end office policy. It may not be 5 days a week. It may be 3 or 4, or you know, maybe it's you get so many a month and your team rotates who's the remote person. But it seems like that we're seeing more employers saying, hey, we really need you back in the office.
Right.
So, you know, we did see it where it resulted in a lot of deals kind of shrinking size on the office side. But if you look specifically in Charlotte, it's a lot of the leases coming up now, which I saw a statistic. It was over 60% of the leases come back now, or leases that have occurred since 2020. So, which gives you a good indication that a lot of those leases may have already thought through of how do we right size to meet this kind of hybrid workforce? Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them. So, you know, it's been encouraging to see groups come into the market and say, we actually need more space.
Yeah.
We've kind of got a handle on what work's going to look like for our employees and our headcount, what we're solving for going forward, and we actually need to grow a little bit. So, you know, it's ebbed and flowed, but you know, we've seen it. You know, those job announcements I mentioned, City, Asset Mark, Coinbase, whatnot. I find that very encouraging when we have groups that are, either new to market, hey, we want to be in Charlotte, plop, let's hire some people, or existing businesses that are kind of like, hey, let's get back to bringing people on board and growing our company. So hopefully that will continue as we get later into this year.
So Jorge, who works for us, and he's back in that part of the building. Hey, Jorge, but he says with the surge in remote work coupled with employee reluctance to return to traditional office settings, I would assume that it created significant vacancy challenge for the commercial office building. And I think that's a great observation, Jorge. He's also been a business owner, which we love. But that has been, I think that's a reason that you could shoot a cannon off in some of those buildings uptown. And one of the things that we looked at, just going through our machinations of, I wanted to just renegotiate terms badly. I didn't want to move. We were the first tenants in that building at 1616 Camden. It's a great building. And Leroy Fox was a great a cafeteria for us, but there was just no budget, and like $52 a square foot was untenable, four times from what we were when we started. Now there are escalators that are always built in, but like holy moly. But that's where it was going. So during COVID, we owned that. We had that entire suite of the whole 5th floor, which was really cut up. I mean, it wasn't the most efficient use of space. So we subleased that back part. Sure. And so Patrick was brought in to help us do that. He negotiated that, which was great. But we had, I think, 17,000 square feet for all of that, if I'm not mistaken. And then we've moved down into 13.8 in this place, but it's a far more efficient. And the other thing that we looked at, something that was very important to us, is we have a community room that we could have 42 people comfortably with seating surfaces in this big room where we were doing training with Sandler, and we would do events pre-COVID. But that's a lot of real estate to just be vacant, or allowing, like, we would let Vistage groups use it for free, and so, but we were carrying the boat, we were floating it. And so I told Patrick, I'm like, hey, I would like to get into a building that's big enough where we could do a shared space where it would be an amenity for all tenants. And I think if we could get in early enough with the right landlord, it could make sense. And so that became a very important part for us. And we looked at a number of places. Tuckasegee got some cool places that, some cool stuff going on, and people were willing. But when we came into this building, so that's how we can continue to grow. The other thing is we went from 18 offices to 10. So what we said was owners, partners, same thing, leaders of departments, and on leadership team, you have access to an office, but it's not yours. You have to sign in for it. And we've got 10 people. There are a number of us that opted not to take offices. So we're like, so I'll be floating around in here, and we've got some other places, but I didn't want, and I had 3 other people that I was sharing off my office with. So I'm like, all right, that's fine. We got used to Envoy system where we could clock in, clock out, but we wanted to have, still offer 2 to 3 days in office, still have remote, as long as people act like adults and, do their stuff, which we've had a pretty good result with that. But we still want to have culture. So we found a great way, like Foundry and Portman, they've been really amenable. So that was a big reason why we're here. And I think it's great. So we can have 60 people now. They're still building that one out. We had some issues with that, so they're building that one out. But they've been fantastic. And the other thing is when I brought Adam and some other folks, some of the other owners, into this space, and it was just a shell. 16-foot ceilings, shell, and there were some hardwoods down, but it was like shell. And they saw this workout facility downstairs, great equipment, Smith machines, Cybex, free weights, and lockable showers, men's and women's. Adam goes, "Why are you even looking at any place else?" Seriously, like, we knew our price point that we had to hit. We looked at some very attractive lease rates and cost per square footage uptown, but then parking was a huge issue. Oh, they give us 10 spots. I needed 50. Well, at 200 and some bucks a spot times 40, got a problem, and so you couldn't overcome it. And the other thing is quite frankly, our Gen Zs and millennials didn't want to work uptown. So we also did a study of everybody. We did not weight the study based on owners or anything like that. We based the study on commute times for everybody and where we were at currently versus where we were going to go, which was another reason we ended up coming here, because it had easy access off of 77, those kind of things. But those are things that you have to kind of pay attention to if you want to maintain. If you say your greatest asset is your people, which they're not assets, by the way, they come and go freely. But if you really value your people, you've got to make sure that they are honored in where you're going. We wanted a safety. That was a very important thing for us, safety, commute times, amenities around. And so even though we don't have restaurants here yet, they will be. We were the first tenants in this building, so I think that's why they were willing to negotiate with us as much as they were on TI, which we really appreciate you, Foundry, and all your guys, and same way with Portman, who owns the building. We really appreciate that. But when people come in here, they're like, well, I wanted our employees to know, hey, by the way, we didn't break the bank in this place. We actually saved some money in our rent, so that because it was going to be untenable, like we would have had to pass so many cost offsets to our clients that it would have been untenable. Well, hey, but they raised our rent, and they're like, yeah, well, we'll go someplace that they aren't paying that anymore. So we had to do that, but also we had a very defined TI budget, and we rolled a lot of stuff into that to where we actually came in under budget, which was a blessing. So again, thanks to On Block and thanks to Redline and Playbook in helping us make sure that we had something nice, but that wasn't going to break the bank. So anyway, a huge shout out to, I highly recommend Patrick and Newmark and those guys. What they have done has been incredible, but you got to have the right team too. So this isn't necessarily about an advertorial for him, but I wanted to say thanks, and I also wanted to do something in this cool space. Joe Farrell, in my humble opinion, growing businesses never acquire enough space for long term. I think that's accurate. I do think that's accurate. It's just
it's a fear factor, because they don't want to take on too much and then be stuck with that carrying cost. But then they find out that they're similar. So we had a similar story, which is we let our professionals, meaning attorneys, decide if they want 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. We also said, if you're not going to be in the office, I think the mark was 3 days, then you're giving up your office. We had now flex offices in various places, so that if a person in a practice group, they can still be with their people and not be stuck at some corner. Well, corner office would be nice. Some corner, some closet,
dark corner
instead, right? And so, and we've done that, and so people had to make choices, but we've made it convenient. So they can pop in their computer. Everything is set up. They have the dual monitors. So it's just like being in their own office. And we actually put lockers outside the various areas that they can lock stuff up and take the key with them if they don't want to take stuff home, but they don't want to leave it out, or they don't want to leave it messy for the other person that might be in this flex office. So that's what we've done, but also, been very methodical about taking on space. So we took a look internally to see what we knew we needed more. We needed to create more space. We had the space because it wasn't being utilized as efficiently as possible. So we retracted before we grew, and therefore we didn't have to take as much space down. We're on 2 floors, so we only took down part of the unoccupied space. There's still more there. We have a right of first refusal. We hopefully are not going to be pressured into taking on the space, but now that we know, as I said, there are many floors that are open shells. I'm sure we will not be pressured into taking on that last 20.
At least not now.
Floor, not anytime soon. So, but yeah, but I also wanted to ask you about this exodus from uptown down the South Boulevard corridor that keeps you going further south and south and south. I was at a restaurant last night at El Puro Cubano, which is a fabulous restaurant.
Ooh,
I
Cuban
wouldn't
restaurant
know.
sounds good.
Yeah, and they have a really cool story, but they have the drums and the bongos.
Oh,
And they have live
fun.
music most nights. And we were there, and but it was not where I would think that they would have put that restaurant. But it's just what the landlord there is doing is trying to change. It's not industrial. It's not third class C space, but you see that effort moving further and further south, like now Loso. Like, okay,
Yeah,
well, lower south then, I guess it exists, right? Same thing out this way, out, down
Yeah.
CG corridor.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, it's not my imagination, I can see it, but I mean, are you seeing that is purposeful? That those landlords are building things to attract people out of the uptown area?
Well, they're certainly building it to attract people, and they're benefiting from some of them are coming out of kind of the central business district. I think that, if you rewind Charlotte 15 years, South End, totally different world, right? And kind of the light rail kind of started things. And the story is light rail, nightlife, residents, and then the office users started to take notice and say, okay, this is where our people live, this is where we should be. That being said, it wasn't really a submarket 15 years ago. It was, had a lot of it was before those single story masonry brick industrial buildings had gone through any kind of conversion to be office space, right? They were just in small industrial flex kind of places. And it's grown, it's still like a hotbed, for 20s and 30-year-olds as far as to live.
Yeah.
Great food and beverage options. So, and it's also a different look from a cultural standpoint, right? Like you're more likely to see a building like this in that area than you are to see like a tower, although there are some now. So you had some groups that were looking like we need to change, our culture doesn't fit uptown, and kind of more of kind of that finance or kind of banking kind of look and feel. And that was more accommodating, along with the fact that, hey, there's all these cool, unique amenities, and we're closer to where our employees are. That being said, it's uptown is still a strong submarket, and just kind of the comment there is, indicative of what I think a lot of other cities are experiencing. Is it's been a flight to quality. So the newer, nicer buildings, the ones with the great amenities and whatnot, they are doing very well. Single digit vacancy rates, which is solid. And then you've got, the buildings that are, kind of built pre-1990. I think the current vacancy is closing in on 40% on average at those buildings. So, and then you've got everything in between. So I think that, there's been some buildings that are a little bit aged, that the landlords have had some money and the patience to be like, we're going to reinvest and bring up the image and quality of the building. And you see some very interesting stuff. I mean, you're building the third floor, kind of turning into an amenity floor, right?
Yeah, they have a golf simulator in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's cool.
Yeah. And so just doing some unique things like that, and then having the bread and butter things like the ability to do conferencing, training, having some food and beverage on site, having some fitness that's nicer on site, and then investing in kind of common areas as far as bringing up the finish level, so the look and feel is more high quality, and that served them well.
Mhm.
They, you know, that building got the Trimont deal. It was 3 floors. They got, you know, a couple other, what is it, the US Dole deal and some more. So they've been chipping away and leasing out space. Whereas some other buildings that were maybe originally built in the same period, mid-70s, that haven't been able to invest in that, or maybe they have some little quirks here and there with the floor plate that's off or whatnot. They just haven't had that success, right? Like they haven't been able to. And I'm definitely of the opinion that there are users for that. It may take a little time, but you know, Class B office space is not going away. It's just
Mhm.
right now that they're not having the success.
You touched on one thing that I thought was important is, um, you know, it's hard to visualize. Most people, it's hard to visualize going into a show. And I started in architecture and I still have a tough time with it. My wife's way better at it. Maybe that's why I'm not in architecture, but Redline had done some spec drawings for the suite and we didn't change a lot. We changed some. We, you know, they didn't have a podcast studio in it and they didn't have some of this other stuff, but like the bones were right and we liked it. Well, then Portman decided to do some spec suites on this main floor. They gobbled them up. Like architects are moving in right next door, and I think they've got a deal pretty close to the front side of this building. And it seems like you've got to have some patient capital if you're going to do that. But then it seems like it pays off because then people can go, oh, wow. And, you know,
I think it's right. As long as you know, you want to have the right team that's advising you on it. So for instance, you're comment about, you know, Redline, you know, they did a great job of kind of telling Portman, hey, here's the general, like, you know, what would be an attractive layout to put out there
yeah,
for groups and to build for what
yeah,
they've already done. And also them just, you know, helping you in regards to, you know, giving you a vision. You're giving the vision, but they are kind of saying, yes, we're absorbing what you're telling us, and here's what we think you're saying,
yeah.
and giving you different iterations of that and helping you kind of narrow in on exactly what it should be. So I think, yeah, a lot of that is just, you know, the ones that have make sure they're put together the right team to not only design it, but also, you know, negotiate for it, and then, hey, how deliver it on time within budget.
Yeah, well, and that's one other thing that I'll say is these guys, our lease was up in October. We wanted to push harder because we have a September 15 and October 15 deadline, so like they're hot. If we could get in the summer, that would be like ideal. We were able to negotiate with the landlord because we're still on the hook with the lease there. To be able to get in here, we got in on time, below budget. But Joseph brings up an interesting thing. He says, we often partner with commercial real estate companies and their agents to find fiber dense areas, as not all buildings or, oh shoot, I've got a Teams. Somebody's giving me, all right, here we go. Not all buildings or locations are created equal. That's true. Do you partner with tech companies like mine to assist in site selection process? That was actually a part of what we were looking for in getting here. We did have some massive issues with the right of entry into this building. AT&T and Segra were in it. Spectrum was not. Spectrum is still not in it. And it was a massive problem. But we have fiber in here and there's fiber right across the street, but that was very important for us. And you know, to Patrick's credit, we did like, and Playbook, I would say as well, these were things, but before Playbook got involved, you were kind of counseling us on that too. So that you bring up a great point. Anything you would add on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly an important point for companies of, is there fiber and who are the providers? Certainly it's something that we ask as part of our initial conversations with the landlord to understand, seeing what the capabilities are. And then, yeah, I think that kind of the comment is more of just like a greater, real estate process standpoint is, everything takes longer than you think it's going to. So timing is a big thing. So whether you're entering a process for leasing or purchasing, starting early enough so that you're not, don't get backed into a corner, or let timing be the part that's the risk, is
Yeah.
beneficial, so that you can vet things and make sure that you're narrowed down to exactly what you need.
We're at the bewitching hour, so we've gone 1 minute over, but you bring up a great point, because I wanted to start putting LOIs out too soon. And you said, back up the truck, pal, hold on, because we're gonna lose negotiating power. So I would just say, make sure you got somebody that knows what they're doing. Because it was really critical for us. So, but he helped us on our timeline. These are the timelines you're gonna have to hit, and what's gonna have to happen on a build versus a retrofit versus these other things. So really important. I just want to say thank you for doing this. And thanks to our team for being quiet while we had the door open.
Yeah.
But it's cooling down a little bit in
Yes,
there.
it
So,
is.
anyway, next week we'll be on Teams. I wonder if those sensors are picking my phone, my finger up, because it'll come back on it. But anyway, and we will have an open house sometime here when we get Adam to spring for some bucks. Maybe we can get Shoemaker, to pay for it too, since they paid for his Hawaii vacation. But anyway, I'm just kidding.
Dude,
Thank you guys for
expensive day.
joining this. Hey, this will be up on the beachy. Yeah, we do need automatic tinted glass. Yeah, Joe, you gonna pay for that? They do have that, like, I've seen it. It's really cool, but that was not in the budget.
You're
We do
not
have
okay
dots
with
that are coming.
People walking by in shorts behind us.
What you see is what you get. We are not a pretentious place. So anyway, thank you guys. This will be up on the Shoemaker YouTube channel later on today, and it'll be up on the BGW YouTube channel later on as well. So thank you guys. We'll see you next week, and back in this room probably. Have a good one.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.